Cowan was checking the section of fence that had been knocked down by the night wind when he suddenly heard frantic splashing and the sound of water beating against something. He quickly moved toward the riverbank. In the middle of the freezing cold water, a massive body was thrashing, trying to stay above the surface. But every movement was heavy and sluggish from exhaustion. Caleb barely had time to recognize that it was an unusually tall Apache woman. Her entire body was covered in bruises and torn flesh, as if she had been savagely beaten before being thrown into the river. He did not stop to think or consider the danger. He dove into the icy water, which sliced into his skin like blades. Her body was as heavy as stone, almost dragging him under. Caleb clenched his jaw, struggling to keep her head above the water as he fought upstream. Every step feeling like mud was pulling him down. His old knee burned with sharp pain, as if it were about to snap. But he did not stop. Finally, he managed to drag her onto the riverbank. Her massive body lay motionless on the damp ground, her breath shallow and broken. Caleb looked at the swollen, purple marks from bindings on her wrists, and a slow, seething anger rose within him. He leaned in close, his voice rough. "What did they do to you?" She did not answer. Her body trembled uncontrollably, her lips turning blue, and then she collapsed in his arms. Caleb carried her body, heavy as a fallen log, into the cabin. Inside, the fireplace held only a few glowing embers. He knelt down and rekindled the fire, then covered her with the thickest blanket he owned. The chill on her skin was still fierce, as if she had just been pulled from the depths of a glacier. Only once the fire burned warm and steady did Caleb begin cleaning her wounds. The marks stretched from her shoulders to her hips, deep purple bruises like the lash of a rawhide whip. Some cuts were so deep, he had to clench his jaw just to look at them. This was no accident. This was attempted murder. She gasped when the warm water touched her wounds, but she did not wake. Caleb moved as gently as he could. When he unwrapped the torn cloth around her wrists, he saw clearly the bloody grooves where rope had been tied far too tight. A long time passed before the giant woman stirred. Her eyelids fluttered, then opened. Her deep black eyes were filled with panic. The reflexes of a warrior kicked in. She bolted upright, but pain slammed her right back down onto the mattress. Caleb reached out, then stopped himself halfway, not wanting to make her feel threatened. "You are safe now," he said softly, his voice low and steady like oak. She panted, glancing around the simple cabin, the fireplace, the scent of antiseptic. Then her eyes met his. Despite her exhaustion, they held the alertness of someone who had spent her life fighting to survive. When Caleb offered her a bowl of water, she finally found her voice. It came out rough and trembling. "They tied me up and beat me, threw me into the river, and left me to die, just because I refused to marry the man my tribe chose." The words dropped like a stone into the silence. Caleb sat down beside the bed, his fists tightening, anger smoldering in him like the coals in the hearth. "What kind of law is that?" he asked quietly. She closed her eyes, a rare tear sliding down her sun-darkened cheek. "Because I am too big, too strong. They wanted me to bear children for the man they chose. I refused. So, they punished me." Caleb looked at her for a long moment. Not with pity, but with the respect one gives someone who has endured cruelty and still survived. Then he spoke, slow and firm, like a vow carved in wood. "Here, no one gets to make you do anything you do not want to do. Not anymore." The towering woman stared at him, eyes still filled with confusion. But for the first time, the firelight reflected something other than fear. There was the faintest flicker of hope. Maela slept deeply until noon the next day. When Caleb returned to the cabin after tending the livestock, he heard a soft sound inside, not the noise of panic, but the steady rhythm of someone tidying up. He opened the door and stopped in his tracks. The towering Apache woman was kneeling on one knee in front of the fireplace, her broad shoulders casting shadows against the wall. She was gathering splinters of wood, arranging them neatly. One of Caleb's old shirts hung on her frame, looking almost comical, buttons pulled slightly across her chest, the sleeves only reaching halfway down her strong forearms. Caleb cleared his throat to signal his return. Maela flinched slightly, but she no longer shrank back like the night before. She simply turned and looked at him with calmer eyes, a kind of quiet, rarely found in those who have survived so much. "I wanted to do something," she said, her voice still hoarse but steadier now. Caleb nodded. You do not have to do anything. Mayla bent down and picked up an old skillet. But I want to. Her presence in the small cabin seemed to shift the air. It no longer felt empty. It felt lived in, warm. When Caleb stepped into the kitchen, he saw her stirring a simple pot of porridge. Her large arm moved with strength, but her hand stirred with surprising gentleness. You should not be on your feet too long, your wounds. I have had worse, she replied, with a faint smile. I do not go down easy. Caleb smiled back, something he rarely did. After lunch, she stepped out onto the porch, gazing across the wide open field. The wind blew through her thick black hair, pushing it to one side, revealing the marks on her neck where the rope had bruised her. You live out here alone? Mila asked. Yeah. No wife? No children? Caleb shook his head, offering no explanation. He had no wish to touch the memories he had buried. Maela looked at him for a moment longer, then said, In my tribe, I have no one left to trust. But this place, she touched the wooden doorframe gently. This place is not as frightening as I thought. Caleb stood still, unsure of how to respond. To him, solitude had become a way of life, but for her, even one day of safety might have felt like a miracle. Finally, Mayella took a deep breath and spoke more clearly, with no hesitation. If you do not send me away, I would like to stay. Caleb looked into her deep black eyes, no longer filled with fear, only the resolve of someone who had lost everything and still chose to stand strong. He simply said, Then stay. And in that quiet, natural way, the first change in his life began. That night, the wind howled through the rotting wooden boards of the cabin. Caleb added more wood to the fire, and the flames cast flickering light across his sharp features and the massive shoulders of Mayela. She sat close to the wall, her legs stretched out, taking up nearly half the small room. The silence between them was not awkward. It felt like the quiet shared by two people who had lived in solitude for so long that the presence of another made the emptiness feel a little less hollow. Mayela was mending the torn hem of Caleb's shirt with a needle. Her large, scarred hands moved with care, each stitch steady and precise. Now and then, she glanced up to check the alignment, then returned to her work, her long hair falling to one side and casting a shadow across her broad back. Caleb watched her a few times, not out of curiosity, but because he had never seen someone so strong, yet so gentle. When he got up to close the window that the wind had blown open, Mayela looked after him. His shirt pulled tight across his back with every movement, and in that brief moment, she realized something she had never dared admit to herself. She felt safe. Caleb turned back and saw her watching him. Cold wind. It will drop below freezing tonight, he said. Mayela nodded. I have been made to sleep in the snow before, but it is warmer here. She paused, her fingers tracing the line of the stitching, then added in a voice soft but painfully sincere, It hurts not having a man like you in my life. You are a good man. Caleb hesitated. He was not used to praise, especially not from someone who had known such betrayal. He sat down. Not too close, but close enough to let her know he was listening. I am just doing what needs to be done, he replied. You deserve to be treated better than that. Mayela stared into the fire, her eyes deep as a midnight well. I cannot remember the last time someone told me that. Silence settled again, but this time, it held no distance between them. Near midnight, as the wind grew stronger, Mayela shifted closer to the fire. Caleb handed her a second blanket. She looked up at him, tilting her head slightly, as if trying to understand why he was being so kind. Aren't you afraid of me? I am not like other women. Caleb looked directly into her dark eyes and answered slowly, You are someone who gave me the chance to start over. You do not scare me. At those words, Mayela's broad shoulders sank, as if a burden she had carried for years had been lifted in a single moment. That night, their bodies came together in a storm of heat, not out of desire but because two broken souls had found warmth in each other. I am truly grateful for your presence here. If this story brought back memories of the old days, dusty evenings, the echo of hoofbeats in your chest, consider subscribing to my channel, so every day we can sit here together again, and I will tell you another tale from the West. Time passed in a peace Caleb had never known he craved so deeply. The snow slowly melted from the roof of the cabin, revealing the first warm patches of brown earth at the tail end of winter. Every morning when he woke, he saw Mayela tending the fire, her massive shadow cast against the wooden wall as if it had always been part of the home. Though her wounds still ached, she could walk again, could even help Caleb with some of the heavier chores. He often told her to rest, but Mayela would just smile and say, "This body was made to endure, not surrender." But what surprised Caleb most was not her strength, it was the quiet tenderness she carried. Mayela would often add extra wood to the stove before he got home, wash his cups, even though her hands were so large they barely fit through the handles, and sometimes leave a small piece of cornbread waiting on the table. And Caleb, he began to notice things he had never noticed before. The steady, heavy rhythm of her footsteps in the yard, the way she tied her long hair back with a worn strip of leather, the way her deep black eyes looked at him when she thought he was not watching. One evening, as the sun sank red behind the mountains, they stood together on the porch. Mayela gazed out across the endless field, her fingers unconsciously brushing the old rope marks on her wrist. "Caleb," she said suddenly, her voice low and steady. If one day they find me." She paused, her breath slowing. "Would you hand me back to them?" Caleb did not need to think. No, one simple word, but spoken with a certainty that nothing could shake. Mayela turned to look at him, her eyes deep like a dark lake. There was no fear left in them, only astonishment, as if she had never dared to hope someone would say that. "Why?" she asked softly. "Because you are not alone anymore," Caleb replied, his voice deep and true. "And neither am I." The last wind of winter blew through, tossing her hair to one side. In that moment, Mayela looked like an ancient warrior statue, strong, proud, but with eyes so soft they could crush your heart. She drew a deep breath, swallowing all the words she could not quite say. "Thank you," she said, simply, but Caleb could feel the weight behind those two words. And in those days, both of them slowly realized, loneliness no longer had a place to return to. That afternoon, the wind shifted suddenly. Caleb was tightening the ropes on the livestock pen when he heard the sound of hoofbeats in the distance, fast and heavy. He stood upright, eyes narrowing toward the eastern trail. 7 Apache riders emerged from a cloud of dust, heading straight for his ranch. They wore leather battle gear, their faces painted with red and black lines. None of them looked like they had come to talk peace. Caleb turned back toward the house immediately. Mayela was already on her feet, breathing hard, eyes wide with alarm. Her wounds had healed, but the memories had not. "They are here for me," she said softly. "I knew they would come. Stay behind me." Caleb replied, his voice low and firm, so steady it made even Mayela pause. When the 7 riders stopped at the doorstep, Caleb stepped outside, unarmed but standing tall. The one in front, a warrior with a thunderbolt tattoo across his face, spoke in rough English. "You, white man, you are hiding a criminal from our tribe." Caleb did not move. "She has committed no crime. She refused a marriage, defied the chosen one. By the law of the tribe, she must return for judgment." The warrior pointed his spear toward the door. "Hand her over." Mayela stepped out, standing behind Caleb, though she was nearly a full head taller. Her eyes were red, from fear and shame. "Caleb, do not. They will kill you." But Caleb did not move. He spoke clearly, every word solid as wooden posts driven deep into the earth. "She is not going anywhere." The warriors paused. For a moment, even the wind fell still. Caleb continued, louder now, stronger. "She is my wife. No one has the right to take her." Mayela choked, her large hand covering her mouth. Tears spilled over, not from fear, but from the shock of being claimed, defended. For the first time in her life, the lead warrior growled. "You dare claim one cast out by her own tribe?" Caleb answered without hesitation. "I do. I protect her. And she stays here." There was a long silence. Then, from behind the riders, an older man stepped forward, Chief Kokis. His eyes on Mayela held no anger, only finality. He spoke slowly. "Mayela, from this day on, you are exiled from the tribe. We hold no claim over you anymore." Mayela dropped to her knees, her broad shoulders trembling. Cochise turned away and raised his hand. The 7 riders pulled their reins and rode off, like a storm beginning to break. When the dust finally settled, Caleb turned and placed a hand on Maila's shoulder. She wrapped her arms around him and broke into sobs, and in that moment, in the middle of the wide open field, they belonged to each other in a way no tribe could ever define. The final winter eventually passed, leaving behind streaks of lingering snow on the roof and the water, softened earth. The spring breeze carried the scent of fresh soil, damp and raw, like a quiet signal that something was beginning to change out there on the open plain. And on a calm morning, Maila placed her hand on her belly, a simple gesture, but enough to make Caleb stop splitting wood. She looked at him, those deep black eyes shining with something different, a quiet certainty, rare for her. "Caleb," she called, her voice hoarse but warm in a new way. He stepped closer. Maila took his calloused hand and placed it gently over her belly. In that moment, Caleb understood. He stood still, heart pounding like hoofbeats on hard ground, a tiny life beginning to form inside this giant Apache woman. Maila looked up at him. "If it is a boy, you will teach him to farm, right?" Caleb let out a soft laugh, a sound that had nearly vanished from his life years ago. "Yes, and if it is a girl, she will ride better than both of us." Maila rested her forehead against his chest, her breath warm against his skin. "I never thought I would get this chance," she whispered. "The tribe wanted me to have children for someone they chose, but no one ever let me choose what I wanted." Caleb wrapped his arms around her, feeling her immense strength melt into his hold. "Now you get to choose," he said. "And this child.com from that choice." In the days that followed, the little cabin seemed brighter. Maila moved more slowly, more carefully. But she was not weaker. In fact, she looked stronger in a way that was hard to explain, like an ancient tree after the storm. Its roots sunk deeper into the earth. Caleb built her a larger chair, sturdy enough to support the weight of the towering woman now carrying a brand new future. Maila watched him saw wood with a tight-lipped smile full of pride. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the spring sky fade into a soft purple, Maila placed her hand on her belly once again. "Caleb, this child will not have a tribe except for us." Caleb took her hand in his and gave it a gentle squeeze. "Then we will be its tribe." The spring wind swept by, carrying with it the scent of soil, young grass, and the warmth of a family just beginning to take shape. By late spring, all the snow had melted, revealing deep, colored streaks of earth stretching like old scars across the frontier. But to Caleb's eyes, that land had never looked more alive. Maybe it was because, for the first time in his life, he was no longer walking it alone. Maila sat on the porch, the wind tugging at her thick black hair. Her belly had rounded noticeably, yet she sat as strong and steady as the mountain itself. Even in pregnancy, she remained the towering, powerful woman whose shadow could stretch across half the porch. Caleb stepped outside and draped a light shawl over her shoulders. She smiled brightly. He sat down beside her, his shoulder resting against hers, smaller, but no less present. After a long moment, Maila finally spoke. "Caleb, the tribe cast me out. I have no name among them, no land, no home." Caleb looked over at her, his voice deep and calm. "You have me. And this land, to me, that is enough." Maila lowered her gaze, her long lashes hiding the wave of emotion rising within her. "I used to believe I was nothing more than a tool to the tribe, chosen to bear children, not to choose how to live." She turned to him, placing her hand over his chest, where his heart beat steadily. "But here, I chose. Not because of law, not because of duty, but because I wanted to." Caleb gently squeezed her hand. "And I lived half my life with nothing but dirt and silence. You brought something I never dared dream of." The spring wind picked up, carrying the scent of fresh grass and the sound of thawed streams flowing again. Maila looked into his eyes, her voice clear and certain like a vow spoken in complete freedom. "I do not want to belong to any law anymore. I choose you." Caleb replied without hesitation, as if the answer had always lived inside him. "And I choose you." No ceremony needed, no tribal blessing, no witness, no approval, just two souls who had been left behind. Now, standing together under the soft blue sky of late spring, finding freedom in one another. Mayla leaned her head on Caleb's shoulder, her voice as light as the breeze. This child will grow up knowing its parents chose each other not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Caleb placed his hand over her belly, where a quiet heartbeat pulsed with life. And it will know it was born of two strong people, and loved freely. The sun dipped behind the hills, casting golden light over two silhouettes, one large, one small, but with hearts beating as one. Out on the wind-swept frontier,